Listening, fill in the blanks.
Let's start.
The wind was blowing at a gentle 16 to 20 kilometers an hour, little more than half what they thought would be needed. What they had failed to reckon with was what happened when the kite was opened. There was a huge initial force 5 times larger than the steady-state force, Garib says. This jerk meant that kites could lift huge weights, Garib realized. Even a 300-ton column could have been lifted to the vertical with 40 or so men and 4 or 5 sails. So Clemens was right, the pyramid builders could have used kites to lift massive stones into place. Whether they actually did is another matter, Garib says. There are no pictures showing the construction of the pyramids, so there is no way to tell what really happened. Psychologists have long held that a person's character cannot undergo a transformation in any meaningful way and that the key traits of personality are determined at a very young age. However, researchers have begun looking more closely at ways we can change. Positive psychologists have identified 24 qualities we admire, such as loyalty and kindness, and are studying them to find out why they come so naturally to some people. What they're discovering is that many of these qualities amount to habitual behavior that determines the way we respond to the world. The good news is that all this can be learned. Some qualities are less challenging to develop than others, optimism being one of them. However, the experiments might even have practical uses nowadays. There are plenty of places around the globe where people have no access to heavy machinery, but do know how to deal with wind, sailing, and basic mechanical principles. Garib has already been contacted by a civil engineer in Nicaragua, who wants to put up buildings with adobe roofs supported by concrete arches on a site that heavy equipment can't reach. His idea is to build the arches horizontally, then lift them into place using kites. We've given him some design hints, says Garib. We're just waiting for him to report back. So whether they were actually used to build the pyramids or not, it seems that kites may make sensible construction tools in the 21st century AD.
Catches have not always been so healthy. Between 1940 and 1959, overfishing led to crashes in salmon populations so severe that in 1953 Alaska was declared a federal disaster area. With the onset of statehood, however, the state of Alaska took over management of its own fisheries, guided by a state constitution which mandates that Alaska's natural resources be managed on a sustainable basis. At that time, statewide harvests totaled around 25 million salmon. Over the next few decades, average catches steadily increased as a result of this policy of sustainable management, until, during the 1990s, annual harvests were well in excess of 100 million, and on several occasions over 200 million fish.
Hosting the Olympics is often understood to be an excellent way to update a city's sporting infrastructure. The extensive demands of Olympic sports include aquatic complexes, equestrian circuits, shooting ranges, beach volleyball courts, and, of course, an 80,000-seat athletic stadium. Yet these demands are typically only necessary to accommodate a brief influx of athletes from around the world. Despite the enthusiasm many populations initially have for the development of world-class sporting complexes in their hometowns, these complexes typically fall into disuse after the Olympic fervor has waned. Even Australia, home to one of the world's most sportive populations, has left its taxpayers footing a $32 million a year bill for the maintenance of vacant facilities.
Probably the most significant finding from research on noise is that its predictability is more important than how loud it is. We are much more able to tune out chronic, background noise, even if it is quite loud, than to work under circumstances with unexpected intrusions of noise. In the Glass and Singer study, in which subjects were exposed to bursts of noise as they worked on a task, some subjects heard loud bursts and others heard soft bursts. For some subjects, the bursts were spaced exactly 1 minute apart, predictable noise, others heard the same amount of noise overall. But the bursts occurred at random intervals, unpredictable noise. Sometimes it is slow, vast bubbles of magma, molten rock from the mantle, inch towards the surface, cooling slowly, to show through as granite extrusions, as on Skye, or the Great Wind Sill, the lava dike squeezed out like toothpaste that carries part of Hadrian's Wall in northern England. Sometimes, as in Northern Ireland, Wales, and the Karoo in South Africa, the magma rose faster, and then flowed out horizontally onto the surface in vast thick sheets. In the Deccan Plateau in western India, there are more than 2 million cubic kilometers of lava, some of it 2,400 meters thick, formed over 500,000 years of slurping eruption.
The source of the red is widely known. It is created by anthocyanins, water-soluble plant pigments reflecting the red to blue range of the visible spectrum. They belong to a class of sugar-based chemical compounds also known as flavonoids. What's puzzling is that anthocyanins are actually newly minted, made in the leaves at the same time as the tree is preparing to drop them. But it is hard to make sense of the manufacture of anthocyanins. Why should a tree bother making new chemicals in its leaves when it's already scrambling to withdraw and preserve the ones already there?
When the project first began, the researchers used handheld infrared thermometers to measure the temperature difference between leaves of different varieties of sunflowers in an experimental plot. Wind can affect leaf temperature, and the research team discovered that its initial approach did not cater for changes in wind speed, which could not be controlled as an experimental variable. The team, therefore, needed a technique to measure temperature continuously that would allow it to examine the effects of other variables such as humidity. They needed a robot.
Children who work on the streets are generally involved in unskilled, labor-intensive tasks which require long hours, such as shining shoes, carrying goods, guarding or washing cars, and informal tracing. Some may also earn income through begging, or through theft and illegal activities. At the same time, there are street children who take pride in supporting themselves and their families, and who often enjoy their work. Many children may choose entrepreneurship because it allows them a degree of independence, is less exploitative than many forms of paid employment, and is flexible enough to allow them to participate in other activities such as education and domestic tasks.
Like, share, subscribe the channel and press the bell icon for further updates.